Hello, everyone. It's nice to see. I will get on this as soon as I figure out this. It's always so good to be up here. I'm just so grateful that you invite me up and that I get to play with you guys. Try out new material, see what works, what doesn't work, how far I have wandered, and where we go. And for those keeping score, today is Pentecost. Pentecost is a very ancient celebration. It happens 50 days after Easter. As the story goes, that after the events of Jesus' life, his murder and his resurrection, he hung out for 40 days and then asked his disciples to wait. And, what it basically is a reclamation of the whole experience that Moses has with a flame that does not cease. And that flame, which is a symbol of the divine, is then poured out upon the disciples and is made available to us. And as the story goes, those who then are baptized in this fire, in this spirit, in this presence, experience what it means to be the sons and daughters of Abba, the loving presence, the divine itself. And so it's a celebration that is happening it's happening all over the world. And one of the places that it happens, of course, is in temples. And so today we're talking about the body temple. And I was thinking about this because a little bit of truth in advertising here. As a Freemason, most of what Freemasonry is about are the temple mysteries. And spoiler alert, the temple is not just simply a building. It is a metaphor. It is an archetype. I love the word temple because its root is a dwelling of the gods, a place for auspiciousness, a place where things happen. It's sacred ground. But it's interesting because the root of the word is the same root as template or pattern. And so in the mystical teachings of Freemasonry and of other esoteric teachings, the temple then is a pattern as much as a place. And what I would offer today is to consider that our bodies are more of a pattern than a thing. Let me explain what I mean by that. So, in Siddhartha, this lovely book on the life of the Buddha that was written by Hermann Hesse, there's a section of it where he is speaking to his teacher Vasudeva, and they were having a conversation about the river. And he's asked him, he says, did the river teach you the mysteries that there is no time? And that as they go on, they go, yeah, what I learned is that the Siddhartha that I am is separated only from the Siddhartha who was, and the Siddhartha that will be only by time, but that they exist always. And I thought about that, and there's the Roman historian Heraclides who says that you can't step in the same river twice, right? So I play with this idea, and I just offer to you as a meditation this, because I've thought about this, going to rivers, because I live in a pretty rural area, and I have one good-sized dog and another size he's 3 months old now. He's going to be a giant dog. He's a Great Pyrenees German Shepherd mix. He's adorable. When we got him, he was 7 pounds. That's when he was 7 weeks old. He is 3 months old now, and he's 35 pounds. And every time he wakes up, he's bigger. It's really quite remarkable. So, when we go to the water, or we step into the river, there's this thought, and I look and I think, as I'm in this river, it's an energetic pattern. It's filled with atoms and molecules and all these things that are constantly in change. And if I was to somehow or another freeze it or make it stop, it would no longer be what its nature is. It would cease to exist, really. And then as I look down on that, I can see these small rocks that are in this stream. But what I know about those small rocks is they weren't always small rocks. At one point, they were boulders. And before they were boulders, they were part of the magma of the earth. And before they were magma, they were stardust. And before they were stardust, they were part of this great experience known as the Big Bang. And so the very essence of what has happened is that boulder, that pebble, continues to evolve and shift and change. And then if I was to look at myself in that, what I realize is that what I'm looking at, this reflection, has always been in change, just kind of like the puppy. Every time I turn around, he's bigger. Every time my body, which is a community, is shifting and changing. And maybe what is real is change and evolution. And what is the event is the body. Kind of like us, what is true and unchanging about who we are is this divine essence that we celebrate here at Pentecost or any other day or whenever we think about it. What is shifting and changing, what is evolving, what is the event, is the physical body itself. The psalmist says that the earth is the Lord's and all that is contained therein. So all creation is this event that is happening in eternity, and it is continually evolving and continuing shifting and continuing changing, kind of like we are. And if we get attached to a moment and try to anchor it into that moment, then we cease to be. You with me on this so far? So playing with that then, my body as a temple, it is an event in time and space. And that really, if I look at it as a pattern, what the pattern is the experience of evolution, of change. And that really, my life is not a static experience, but it's a journey. Lately, I've gotten into, not lately gotten into, but where my attention is these days, is in Celtic spirituality. And the reason I'm so intrigued with Celtic spirituality is because it really honors the sacredness of the body, because it honors the sacredness of the earth. And and again, if we look at something like the book of Genesis, where we see that everything is created by the divine and is named. And if something is created by the divine, what it means is that everything is in relationship to the divine. This, as essence, the entire story of Genesis basically is two themes. One is that everything in creation is in relationship to the Creator, and that the Creator, call it what you want, name it what you want, or no name it at all, there's a fidelity to it. So there's a fidelity, a dependability, a opportunity for trust or belief in the experience of change itself as opposed to the thing itself. And even when the ancient Hebrews were anchored into the cult of the temple, like all ancient people, they believed that their God existed in the temple. And then there's this wonderful story in the beginning of the book of Ezekiel where we read that, first of all, before that, the temple had been destroyed and the aristocracy of Jerusalem had been moved to Babylon. And there was this deep longing and this deep sorrow because the thing had been destroyed. The temple had been destroyed. And if the temple was God's house, then where was God? And then there's this wonderful vision that Ezekiel has where he sees this thing coming across the desert, and there's a wheel within a wheel, and it's a very interesting kind of experience that he's having. But what we understand is this, is that the divine essence is not contained within a thing, but comes to us. And it comes to us when we feel, when we believe, when we experience exile. Those moments when we feel most cut off. Those moments when we feel alone. Those moments when we feel far, far from home. There, that divine presence comes to us. And so maybe really one way of looking at the temple is to look at it as a template of the journey itself. And this is my intrigue with Celtic spirituality because of its deep love of the body, its deep love of the earth itself. And you know, something that Dr. Holmes says is he says, we see the condition on the outside and we heal it on the inside. And so maybe one way as we look at the love of our planet and how we heal the planet is to love and heal our bodies. And maybe as we become more in touch with the sacredness of this event called this experience in life, it shifts and changes our relationship to the external. Because, you know, we're always wanting to change it out there, right? You know, it's that line that we say, well, you know, if only that person would get their act together, I would be a better person. You know, or if only I won the lottery, I'd be prosperous, or if only this, or if only that. And we forget that really where it happens is on the inside first. And when it happens on the inside, then the external corresponds to the internal. Yes, that's how it goes. And so there's this journey that we begin to happen. And there's this beautiful Scottish poet by the name of Kenneth White. And he talks about this journey. And the word that he uses, I love this word, is peregrination. And peregrination is that sacred journey to the sacred place. It is that path that we take to the innermost being of ourself. It is the discovery or the pilgrimage to the temple itself. And he says that there's a threefold path that we take. And the first part of the path is to rediscover, reimagine our idea of the earth itself. In essence, it's to come back to an experience of connection. You know, the unifying myth that we have in our culture is that we are alone and that we are separate and that it's up to us to take care of ourselves. But the truth is, there's a deeper, more interesting, more elegant, more powerful unifying myth, which is that we are part of something greater than ourselves. And this is what nature teaches us, is that everything is connected to everything else and supports everything else. And that we have lost that sense of connection, especially since the industrial age. We've really sort of separated ourselves. During the time of the Enlightenment, of course, we had the whole Cartesian thought taught by Descartes, right? That the universe is sort of this vast machine that we step out of. And what I would offer is we're really kind of living a lie, because there's no truth in that. The reality is that everything is interconnected, and then we're part of it. We're not separate from it. And maybe the reason that the earth is in such dire straits that it is today is because we've been operating under this false pretense that we're separate from it. Or maybe sometimes some of the conditions that we have in our own lives, or those times when we're feeling disjointed or disconnected or not even in our body, is because we have fallen victim again to the lie. There's this line from Emily Dickinson that I just love. She says, not knowing when the dawn will come, I open every door. I love that. Not knowing when the dawn will come, I open every door. And what that means, I think, or how I experience that is there's a whole lot that I don't know. I don't know when things will be resolved, when things will happen, when it'll be all made right. But I open every door. I live in the experience of possibility. I live with a sense of openness, a sense of curiosity, not judgment. And so the first step then is this reconnecting, this remembering, this returning to our sense of oneness with all that is living and all that is there. And then that brings us to the second part of what Mr. White says, and that is this: to reword our language to the earth. Reword, rethink, react differently than how we had before. It's, in a sense, when we are in relationship to something, we behave differently about it and around it. You know, there's this line from St. Augustine. I'm sounding awful churchy today. So Augustine has this great line where he says, if you love God, you can do whatever you want. When I first heard that, I was in my early 20s, and I thought, score. You mean I could do whatever I want? All I got to do is love God? How hard is that? But those of us who are in love realize that love does not motivate us by fear. Love does not motivate us by obligation. Love always, in order for love to be love, it must be free. And so we freely choose to do what is loving in return. To love God means to do whatever I want, but what I want to do is please my beloved. And so I think differently, I act differently, I speak differently, I engage differently in what that looks like. And what that brings me is this sense of a deeper sense of connection to it. And then he says, once we have reconnected to the earth, and once we have renewed our language, our thought, our action, then we're really ready for the journey within. And I think often what that means is we have to let go before we can go forward. Mitch Horowitz has this line where he says this: "It is an odd fact of human nature that new paths withhold themselves until we develop the courage to dispense with the old ones." Right? So living in Fallbrook, when I did, and serving the Hilltop Center, which I do, but when I first moved to Fallbrook, I moved in 2005. In 2006, we had one of those great fires. And an interesting experience is we had to evacuate. And I had no idea what that meant or how you did that. I was a city boy and a beach kid. And I remember talking to a friend of mine on the phone because she called me to see if I was okay. And I was looking out my window and I saw these blue skies and everything was fine. I said, "Oh, Kathy, it's going to be good. It's going to be fine." And then I went to the other side of my house and I looked out that window and there was like flames and smoke and things coming. I got to go. And it was like, what do I take? And so I ran around like a maniac. You know, I grabbed my shoes. I grabbed my laptop. I ran downstairs. I grabbed my dogs, jumped in the truck, and off I went. But you know what was really interesting is talking to everybody during the evacuation. It wasn't so much what we take. It's what we leave behind. You know, because things always replace themselves somehow or another. I have a friend of mine who's a photographer. He's an artist, and he's a photographer. He says, the art of photography isn't what to add in, but what to leave out. But think about that in our own lives, right? When we're creating, when we're wanting to grow, when we're ready for this journey to go within, it's not what we take. It's what we leave behind. So that we are fresh and capable for the newness. Because if we keep trying to drag these old ideas, these old thoughts, these old beliefs, these old obligations, these old whatever, blah, 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 we can't see the path ahead of us. We can't journey inward. If we still think that we are a thing and not an event, we're trying to stop the thing that is most real. Change, evolution, the luring of spirit itself. So it's really about creating a new imagination. And by the way, we already know this. Again, going back to Kenneth White, he has this, in one snippet of one of his poems, he says this. He says, entering the valley was like entering into a memory. Yes, it's that sense that when we see beauty, when we see goodness, it awakens something in us that we already know. And by the way, one of the things that Kenneth White speaks about, it's not part of Celtic spirituality, it would grow out of that, I suppose, but it's this: how about this for a practice this week, if you dare? And it is this: spend as much time listening to the trees as you do to the news. Every hour that you are on social media, spend that amount of time in nature, in a garden, in the forest, at the beach, to balance ourselves, that whatever we are doing that is distracting us, as George Carlin says, we have outsourced the authority of our life for gizmos. For every moment that we're doing that, compensate that by a moment where we reconnect to the earth. That's been my spiritual practice lately, and it's really interesting. It was really difficult at first because it's like, does that mean I can't read my email? Can I read it outside? Can I read it in the garden? Can I check Twitter when I'm walking the dogs? No. It's a different kind of thing because what we're trying to do is reshape ourselves to be a different kind of person as we begin to travel inside. So Ignatius Loyola says it this way, and maybe this is the easiest way to offer it to you. 3 easy steps, right? The first, see God, whatever you define God to be. See the divine. I like to use the word God because it makes people uncomfortable. It's a word that we have attached so much meaning to that people hear, God. So whatever it is, see God in everyone and everything. And stay still until you do. Yeah. Stay still until you do. And when you do, respond in reverence. Respond to yourself in reverence, because it starts with us, right? See God within yourself and speak and act reverently to yourself. And when we begin to do that, we begin to do it outside of ourself. And it ripples and ripples and ripples. And then the third thing is, again, it just naturally flows from that. If we can see God in everyone and everything, and if we live reverently for that we understand that why we are here is to be of service. Again, because we're changing the myth by which we live by. It's not me alone, how am I going to figure it out? But me as part of something greater than myself. And when I begin to understand that within myself, then I understand what is mine to do. And that's really the only way we can change the world. And I guess, it's one of the gifts as you get older is to realize, what's yours to do and what's not yours to do. And that letting that go, I have several circumstances in my life where I'm realizing that the best way that I can support something is to pull back my need to control it, manipulate it, my idea of what it is. I have a friend of mine, true, because this is how neurotic I am. I have a friend of mine, and she's the same way. Neither one of us will sleep on airplanes. I can fly to Italy, and I will toss and turn, but I probably won't sleep. I can go to Europe, I can go, Southwest, wherever it is, because I have this crazy notion, and I know how crazy this sounds, but tell me you don't have these kinds of crazy thoughts, is that someone might say that I have to fly the plane, so I have to be ready and alert just in case someone says, by the way, did you ever see the movie Airplane, I think it was, or Airport, or one of those ones where, somebody had to fly the plane. In fact, it just happened just recently. Somebody was in a plane with somebody, and the pilot had some kind of heart failure or something like that, and the control tower talked the guy into landing the plane. That's my fear. She's the same way. I'm going to be the one that's going to be asked. I know how crazy that sounds, but that craziness comes from a neurosis that says, I have to fix anything within my sight to do. And it isn't. It isn't. Neither is yours. We see the condition outside and we heal it on the inside. And this idea that we're supposed to fix and change everything is, as T.S. Eliot says, a distraction from a distraction that's a distraction. So my thought is this. Your life, my life, is an event within time and space. And not to get too caught up in what is changing and evolving, but to keep our attention on what is not changing, what is not evolving, which is the divine essence of who we are, which is the divine itself revealing itself as us. And the way that we begin to do that is to shift our attention to seeing ourselves part of something greater than ourselves in this beautiful planet that we call Earth, which is the temple, which is the template, which is the dwelling place of the divine. And to live accordingly like that. And when we practice that, then the real fun begins, because then that's when the journey happens. And as a closing prayer, I offer you these words from one of my spiritual heroes, St. Teresa of Avila. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. Everything passes away. God alone endures. Patience obtains all things. Whosoever has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices. God alone suffices. God alone suffices. So it is. Thank you.